Look, if you've ever blown it with money, if you've ever struggled with it, I've been there. And that's why I wrote the book, because I knew that the things that I was dealing with, I knew that there had to be other Christians out there. Welcome back to the E-Forge Podcast, where kingdom entrepreneurs are forged into high-impact leaders and legacy builders. I'm Cory Long. Today's episode is close to my heart. We're talking about my book, To Love Is to Give, why I wrote it, how it's changing lives, and the dangerous money beliefs that keep so many Christians stuck, broke, or just afraid of wealth. Look, I've lived this. I've believed the lies. I've mishandled money, and I've kept the guilt or felt the guilt because once I saw scripture actually says about wealth, entrepreneurship, and kingdom impact, it changed everything. I believe it can change everything for you too. There was a time when I was afraid I wasn't enough. I wasn't worth wealth. I wasn't worth bigger money. I remember when I very first started my marketing company, when I charged $50 an hour, I thought, oh my goodness, somebody pay me $50 an hour to do work for them? And then it was $100 an hour and $150 an hour. And I've charged up to $1,000+ an hour now for consulting and other things that I do. It's fascinating to me that my own worth is tied to that, right? It's tied to how I feel about myself. Look, I worried that money would corrupt me. I worried that I would get greedy or I would lose my way. And I don't know about y'all, but I have very rarely ever seen a sermon that's taught in church about wealth or wealth building or rich or any of those words. Even though we see it all through scripture, even though we see all through scripture, and Jesus talks about money more than he talks about any other subject. Look, I've overspent, I've overpaid, I've stretched things too far, I've mishandled money. I've mishandled what God's entrusted to me. There have been times when I've been a really good steward, and there have been times when I haven't been a good steward. And that's why I wrote the book, because I knew that the things that I was dealing with, I knew that there had to be other Christians out there. I knew that there had to be people that came to church and sat in a church on a Sunday morning or a Wednesday night or whatever it was, whatever time it was that they were there, maybe a men's meeting or a men's Bible study or something, and they needed to talk about what it was like to grow a business, what it was like to be an entrepreneur, what it was like to figure out how do I give? How do I actually tithe off of this? How do I give money, and how much do I give? And do I tithe off of gross or net or some other number that I made up? What about taxes and all the other things that come along with it? Look, if you've ever blown it with money, if you've ever struggled with it, I've been there. I've done that. I bought the t-shirt over and over again. I've had extra income before whenever we just didn't use it correctly. And then I've had times when I've used it like really well and invested it really well. And I've had times when we've done some amazingly creative things to contribute to nonprofits and ministries, and for us to be able to travel around and do all of the ministry things that we did in an RV for 4.5 years, just going to churches and camps and children's homes and recovery centers and other places, and just literally driving up in our motorhome and saying, hey, we're here to serve. Use us. How can you use us? We don't care what it is. We don't care if it's scrubbing toilets or mowing the yard or teaching Bible class or preaching or leading worship or whatever. I'll do whatever you ask me to do. But I wasn't able to do that until I had the income, the resources, the time freedom to be able to go do that. Look, there's probably 10 money beliefs or more that Christians struggle with. And there's lies and there's truth when it comes to it. And there's the story that you've been told. There's even the story that you've been told, maybe not on purpose, through sermons and preaching and teaching. When I went back and started to look at scripture, and I looked at what scripture actually says about Christianity and about wealth and about becoming rich and about taking care of your family and leaving a legacy and doing kingdom impact and giving and serving and doing all those things, it fascinated me how a few of the stories had ever been shown in the light of entrepreneurship. I'll give you one line. And this is something I bought into. True Christians are meant to be poor. Whether we say that out loud or we just believe that, or maybe another way to say it would be, true Christians are meant to just make sure that they pay their bills and get by and give a little to their church and to the nonprofit they're involved in, but they don't have a whole lot of extra. When I was a youth minister, I think the very first youth ministry job I had, we were thinking about this the other day. I think I made somewhere around $12,000 a year. $12,000 a year, that's all I made. And I used to pat myself on the back and go, oh, I'm that poor youth minister. And I would make jokes about it. If you know anybody, if you're in ministry right now, or if you know somebody that's in ministry, you know that they have probably gone through that or are going through that. There's a small subset of ministry staff that's paid really well, but the bulk of ministry staff that I have personally been involved with, or my own personal experience, they're not paid real great. And they struggle just to pay their bills and to get by and to do the things that they need to do for their family and the things that they need to do for their kiddos and their spouse. And especially if there's medical or there's other big things that happen, it becomes very difficult. So are Christians really meant to be poor? Look, my experience is I believed humility equaled poverty because that's kind of how I was taught. That's how I was taught through sermons and classes and that kind of thing. But that's not true. That's not true. We see wealth all through Scripture. In fact, that's why that's why the disciples were so confused when the rich man came, right? And Jesus had that conversation with him, and he turned and left. And that rich young ruler, as he went through that situation and he went away sad. The disciples were confused, and they were confused because if this guy was wealthy, that in their minds that equated that God was blessing this guy. And they were like, wait, if that guy can't get to heaven and he's done all of these things and God has blessed him with wealth, who can get to heaven? The truth is Abraham, Job, Solomon, take your pick. Like look in the New Testament, Barnabas, Aquila and Priscilla, even Paul had money. He had wealth, and there's many more. And God used it for his kingdom. Even Jesus had wealthy women that traveled with him. And that's how it says that they were able to go and do ministry, as these wealthy women that supported their ministry along the way. Jesus even had enough wealth that he needed somebody to take care of the money. He needed somebody to actually take care of the money. That means there was enough money to be taken care of. Look, we have to stop equating lack with holiness or humility with poverty. That's not what Scripture says. That's why one of the reasons why I wrote the book. Here, I'm going to give you another lie. Lie number 2, wealth will corrupt me. There was a time, and there's been moments in my life where I thought more money would be more greed. Look, if you watch any movie on TV, who's the most greedy person or who's the most corrupt person in the whole movie? It's usually the wealthy guy, the rich guy. It's just the way it's framed. I think I thought that, well, if I become wealthy, if I have money, if I'm able to do all these other things, then I'm going to be greedy. I'm going to be something that I don't want to be. I'm going to become corrupt. But here's the truth. Money just amplifies, it magnifies who you already are. If you're already, you can be greedy and have no money. You can be greedy and be broke. You can be greedy and be poor. There's both sides of that spectrum. Money just magnifies it. It literally amplifies who you already are. If you're already a greedy person, you're already a jerk without money, you're going to be a jerk with money. It's just the way it works, right? Because it just amplifies who you are. Why do you think Jesus talks so much about money and wealth? Stewardship is the key. Giving is the key. Being grateful is the key. All of these things I cover in To Love Is to Give. If you've struggled with the idea of humility equals poverty, or that Christians can't have wealth or money, or you've struggled with wealth will corrupt me, or that wealth is going to make me greedy, or something that you're not, that's why I wrote the book, To Love Is to Give. That was the whole purpose of it, because I was feeling those things. Here, I'm going to give you another lie. Lie number 3. Look, a lot of times, and I deal with this in my training. Many of you that have followed me for a while, you know that I have a couple of thousand students spread around the world that are Christian believers, that I've been able to teach how to go create income to be able to go do the things that they want to do with basically a side hustle, a part-time gig over here, but it gives full-time income or better. I have students that are doing $100,000 a year, students that are doing $1 million a year. I have some students that are doing $3 to $5 million a year. Here's the deal. And I think this was really hard for me to get, especially coming out of ministry full time. I didn't think I was worthy of wealth. Now, that may not have been something that I would have said out loud. Here's what I'll ask you. Would you consider yourself rich right now? Would you consider yourself rich? If you own a car or two and have a house, and if you are able to feed yourself every day and have running water and electricity and air conditioning and heating and all that, compared to the bulk of the world, you are rich. Would you call yourself rich? If I handed you $10 million today, would you feel worthy of $10 million? Would you feel like you're worth $10 million? Would you feel like you could be entrusted with $10 million? Would you be able to tell somebody, I'm wealthy or rich? Would you know what to do with that kind of money and income? Like there are these things about us where we don't feel worthy. And it's not just money. It comes across in all kinds of other ways in our relationships and our spiritual walk. It comes across in the work that we do and the career that we have. It comes across in our health. We used to talk about all the time in the children's home how a young lady, because I worked and ran Carpenter Place Children's Home in Wichita, Kansas. It's an all-girls children's home for girls that are dealing with abuse and neglect and all these other issues. And they were privately placed kiddos that would come in and live at the home. And they would live in these cottages, these homes, these big houses, 7, 8 bedroom homes with a set of house parents that would take care of them and take care of their daily needs and all of that. We figured out really quickly, and it has always stuck with me, how they felt about themselves on the inside manifest itself on the outside. How they took care of themselves, how they like personal hygiene, how they dealt with other people, the words that they used. All of those things would come out from the inside out. Look, if you're a child of God, which we all are children of God, we've been entrusted with multiple talents. We've been entrusted with all of this gifting. There is no other you in this world than you. You've been given something totally unique, something totally different from everybody else in this world. Are you using it to build kingdom impact? Are you using it to do the things that you've been called to do? I feel like I'm barely scratching the surface of what God's called me to go do. Look, worthiness is more about whose you are. Worthiness is more about who created you, whose likeness you are, than it is about any of the other stuff. It's not about the money, it's not about the stuff. And yet that's what culture would tell you that it's tied to. But we have to change that inside of ourselves. Look, we're just entrusted with the income. We're just entrusted with the money. We are stewards. Meaning that if you were a financial planner, you wouldn't be out bragging about the $5 million that somebody gave you to use for financial planning because it's not your money. Guess what? That money in my bank account, in my business accounts, that's not my money. It's God's money. If it's not my money, then I shouldn't build my worth around it. I should build my worth around whose I am, who's my God, that I'm a child of God, that I'm a son of God, right? We need to reframe this idea of worthiness. It's about stewardship. It's about being gifted. It's about like being a child of God, not perfection. So, do you believe those three? And those are just three. Look, some of you are probably walking around right now thinking, well, I true Christians are really supposed to be poor. I'll give you another example. We talk about all the time, Mother Teresa, she, in all, as far as her personal self, she lived very simply. But for her to have the impact that she had, there were millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars poured into that ministry to allow her to go do the impact and to go do the things. Think about any of the people that you look at in scripture that had massive impact. All of the disciples had to have some way to support themselves. Many of them were entrepreneurs. The fishermen owned businesses. They had their own boats. They had their own workers. Their families did. Paul was a tent maker. We think of that as something that's not big, but he was able to actually support his whole, not just himself, but everybody that was traveling with him. They say that's probably up to a dozen people that traveled with him. That could have been upwards of $1 million in today's money that he made through his little tent making business. How do you think he lived in Rome in a house? Like they didn't just give that to him when, when he was restricted to his house. Like we don't think about these things often, but Barnabas had money. He had land. We don't think about the fact that at the end of Acts 2, when people sold their land and gave to the disciples, they had to have had wealth. They had to have had resources to be able to go do that, to be able to sell the land and then go give the money. You can't be broke and poor and have something to go sell to give to the disciples to be able to go do the thing. They had to have funds to be able to travel and to take care of themselves and to feed themselves and to be able to go do the things. So lie number one, true Christians are meant to be poor. Lie number two, wealth will corrupt you. Lie number three, I don't deserve wealth. These are all lies. And we can find the truth in scripture if we'll just go dig a little. That's why I wrote To Love Is to Give. Look, I just mentioned it earlier. Jesus had wealthy disciples in his circles. Joseph of Arimathea, Lydia, the rich women that traveled with him, Barnabas, Priscilla and Aquila. Like we see it all through scripture. Old Testament, New Testament, pick one, doesn't matter. So much wealth throughout scripture. Proverbs 31 woman was entrepreneurial. God consistently blesses his people for stewardship and kingdom impact. And that stewardship, like if you look at the parable of the talents, if you look at any of these stories throughout scripture, it was the ones that went out and actually did the work, that took the risk. They were entrepreneurs. They were good stewards. Many of you are burying your talents. You're burying your wealth. You're burying the things that you have instead of releasing them and letting God go open the doors for you to go become impactful in this world. Proverbs 13:22 says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. Guys, you realize that that's your grandchildren. That means you leave an inheritance to your your grandchildren. How much wealth do you need to leave an inheritance to your grandchildren? An inheritance, something that's worth something. Deuteronomy 8:18 says, it is God who gives you the ability to produce wealth, right? Matthew 25, parable of the talents. It's about multiplication, not burying it and going and hiding it. It's about going and taking risk. Wealth is a tool. It's neutral. Money has no power one way or another. It's just a thing. It's how we use it that matters. How you steward it determines impact. And again, if we go back to our analogy of a financial planner, you wouldn't be bragging about the money that you were given to go financial plan. You would take great care of it. You would do what you needed to do to grow it, but it's not your money. We need to look at it the same way. We need to look at our money the same way. It's not my money. This is not my house that I'm sitting in. They're not my businesses. They belong to God. Those vehicles sitting in my garage are not mine. They belong to God. How am I going to use all of this for kingdom impact? Inside of my book, To Love Is to Give, there's three things that we work through: pride, selfish ambition, and workaholism. I've dealt with all of these, guys. If we think it's our money, if we think it's, oh, well, it's my success. Well, it was all of that effort that I put in. Oh, man, you should have seen me on that stage or doing that thing or selling that thing or building that business or all those hours that I put in. Yes, yes, we do have a responsibility. Yes, we do take part in that. Yes, God gifted us to do things in a unique and special way, each one of us. But guys, it's not our money. It's not our success. God opens the doors. God brings us the clients. God brings us the wealth. God brings us the multiplication, not us. Not us. God multiplies it. Remember, parable of the talents. Like, what happened to the guy that actually went and did the thing and doubled his talents? God gave him more. God gave him more because he could trust him. He knew that he was going to be a good steward. What about selfish ambition? Oh, it's all about me, right? We live in the me world. It's all about me, my feelings. You go do you, right? Those kinds of sayings. But that's not what it's about. Building wealth isn't for me, it's for kingdom work, it's for kingdom impact. We bought a house with a pool and other things on purpose. Not for, I don't, I've been in the pool twice, I think, since we've lived here, maybe three times. The pool is for the college students and the other ministries that we're involved in. We've had them over many, 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 many times. They'll bring friends over. We have a hot tub that we bought. And that hot tub has, it's kind of funny. In a way, that hot tub has been a kingdom tool. We have a couple of young ladies that will bring other young ladies over and they'll have a hot tub time at night. In the evenings, they'll come in. They know how to get into our house and around to where they're going. They come in, we wave at them, say hi. We're inside the house doing our thing, and the girls go out and they do their thing. And they'll sit around and they'll talk about kingdom business. They'll talk about life. They'll minister to these other young ladies. It's not about my stuff. It's not about none of this is mine. It's God's. The house is God's. The pool, all the stuff is his. It's not mine. I've been there when I've been selfish. I've been there when we've spent money on things we didn't need to spend money on. I've been there when I thought it was my stuff, right? It's my success. It's all because of what I did. It's not true. It's not true. God opened those doors. God gifted you. God gave you breath today to be able to go do those things. What about workaholism? Look, I don't know about you guys, but if I'm doing something I enjoy, and I enjoy working. I've always enjoyed working. And if you followed anybody online for any length of time, guys, the hustle culture that's been live for the last 10, 15 years, that hustle culture where the very first thing, and I catch myself, I catch myself doing this all the time. Somebody asks me, how's it going? Oh, I've just been busy. And by us saying those kinds of things, it gets really tricky because we begin to believe ourselves. Look, we have to trust God more than we trust the hustle, the busyness, the overworking, the workaholism, the spending too many hours. We have to trust God will provide more than the other pieces of that puzzle. And we have to trust that even when things get hard and tough. So workaholism can be a very big issue when it comes to anything that has to do with especially our family, our business, our spiritual walk, our health. It affects all of it. So those big three things, I deal with those big three issues in the book, and I show you how to actually defeat those, how to defeat those in your life. Look, I wrote To Love Is to Give for you to break free from guilt, shame, lies about money. And I wrote it for you to be able to show generosity with time freedom and money freedom and the things that God has given and gifted you. I provide a roadmap for kingdom entrepreneurs to be able to grow without guilt. I've dealt with the guilt before. I have a workbook that's going to be coming out that's going to go along with this To Love Is to Give book. It's going to be a workbook where you're going to be able to sit down with a small group or your family or just by yourself, and you're going to be able to work through and put daily principles into practice. So if that's something that you're wanting, make sure and follow me, keep up, subscribe to this channel, whatever it is that you're on. Leave a review. I want to hear from you. And when that workbook comes out, it's going to be on Amazon. It'll be plastered everywhere so that you can find that. And look, all of the proceeds from this book, I make nothing from this book. All of the proceeds go to Rise Recovery St. Louis. If you guys haven't checked it out, it's a Christian discipleship recovery home for women that are dealing with meth addiction or alcohol addiction or other types of addiction, and they need to get away and they need to move into a Christian environment to where they can recover, they can be redeemed, they can be restored. And that's what we're doing. We have a home. We have a couple of women that are in it now with a house mom that takes care of them, makes sure that they're moving in the right direction, and they get Bible studies and they get training and they get taught how to, when they get back out into the world, what that's going to look like. And they start working on redemption with their families, and maybe they have kiddos or whatever it may be. And we go through all that. And all the proceeds from the book all go to Rise Recovery St. Louis, every bit of it. So when you buy the book through Amazon, you buy it through wherever it is you find it, that goes directly to there. So you're literally changing lives by buying the book. Look, I wrote To Love Is to Give because I know what it feels like to wrestle with money lies. I've been broke. I've been afraid. I've mishandled it when I've had a lot of money. I also know that freedom comes from when you align money with scripture, with generosity, and with kingdom impact. If this spoke to you today, grab a copy of To Love Is to Give. You can get it on Amazon. Just go search for it or one of the links. There'll be a link in the description of this video. Go buy the book. It's a super easy read. It's not super long. You can read it in one evening. And then keep an eye out for the workbook. I'm going to be launching that soon and publishing it soon. It's going to be on Amazon. You can also read a couple of the first chapters on To Love Is to Give on Google Books. So go check that out too. It's going to help you to take action in your own life. If this resonated with you today, subscribe to this podcast. Subscribe to my YouTube channel or to Amazon or Apple or Spotify, wherever it is that you're at. Leave a review. I would love to hear from you. And share this with someone that maybe has been struggling with money beliefs in their Christian walk. Let's get into a conversation. And remember, God didn't call you to bury your talents. He called you to multiply them for his glory. This is The Forge, where leaders are made and legacies are built.